I should have moved out when he told me to. I know that. I'm a fool. My brother always says it. Man is born to trouble as sparks fly upwards. And our family has tragedy in the blood. That's what my father used to say. It's in our essence, in our livers. London, 1663. And the rumours were there from September. 2 Frenchmen in Drury Lane, old Mother Garrett's boarding house. Some call it a boardie house, and yes, I think she does do a little in the way of wenches on the side, but I've never tried it. Not for me, that sweaty roll in an unmade bed, stiff with the lies of other people's needs. And knowing my luck, I should have contracted pox as quick as a wink. No, 2 Frenchmen, sailors, went in on their feet and came out on their backs. It is said they had the marks, the tokens, under their arm, in their groins, but they were not recorded as plague victims in the burial rolls. The authorities were quick to cover it up. My mother died in childbirth when my brother Samuel was 5. Is this tragedy? Many work in the poorhouse as orphans. We at least had my father, who kept a roof over our head. But it was a tragedy to me. He married a woman who beat us and then ran away with his life savings, leaving him broken. And my brother is now a merchant in the city, where he trades in millinery, scrapes by with a thin, shrewish wife and 5 small children. I work for a shipping company on the docks, copywriter, poorly paid. In between times, I write pamphlets, essays, the beginnings of novels. I want to be a writer. I am a writer, just not a recognised one yet.
They had the tokens.
That's my brother, Samuel.
And I'm not waiting around to see if it spreads, for it will.
There are no printed news sheets, save the London Gazette, but word of mouth spreads the rumour that the authorities are holding secret council to discuss its prevention.
And of course there is talk in the dockyards of Holland, in Amsterdam, where already the bodies lie in the streets. And there are whispers that the churchmen are abandoning the parishes. That is always the first sign. Then they will start locking down the houses, clearing out the markets, bringing out the dead carts at night.
I have my job. You have money put aside. I must work at the docks or I do not eat.
Come with us, we will feed you. My mother-in-law has a barn you can sleep in.
And my brother has always been generous with other people's property.
It's in the country, far from the city.
Harrow, Hounslow, some such place.
And we're leaving tomorrow.
So soon?
Well, once they shut the city gates.
But I'm a fool. I always make the wrong decision.
You could have married into money. Jane's father was an alderman and she an only child. And she liked you.
I knew that. But I'd already fallen for Dolores, who danced in the theatre, and who died of consumption 3 months to the day from when we were wed, carrying our unborn child, a tiny nut deep in her womb. A tiny nut, not destined to see the light. By December, rumours had taken form and wings and spread across the city like a rash. More deaths in St James's, St Giles, Drury Lane, moving all the time closer to the city gates. For a while, the harshness of the January weather stopped it in its tracks. But February was mild, and March brought the news that it was in the alleys, where I have my abode. And then people were buying in panic, flesh meats, beer and bread, and storing it in their houses. But then there were no more ships on the Thames. My job ceased overnight. But Grace, who was aboard one of the last ships in, on her way to visit her aunt on the east coast. I've always been a sucker for a hard luck story. She told me that she had had the illness but was now coming to convalescence and was clean. And seeing as there's no transport and she had nowhere to stay, well, I thought, well, maybe a talisman, a good luck charm. And she was company. I let her stay with me. Where a house has plague, it is shut up by the authorities for 28 days. And so it is with me. Grace lied. She had the tokens inwardly and died on the 6th day. Outside, the weather is fine. I can hear the birds, see the sun. But I cannot live. I must wait. So, I keep this journal. A journal of a plague year. A journal of my tragedy. My name is Daniel. I'm a writer. And in a few days, I will know if I am to live or if I die along with Grace. April 1664. My name is Daniel, and I have survived. Many are not so lucky, I know that, but I have survived. I have no tokens on my body, and I've kept myself busy by documenting what is happening in these strange times. My lockdown diary, my journal of the plague year. I've been shut up for 28 days, so I can now leave the house. And just as well, for I'm close to starving. There was a time when people thought the winter might prevent the outbreak from spreading. But we're now into April and the weather is hot. The plague has entered the city gates. The court has removed to Oxford, and I've seen nothing from my window but the gentry and nobility leaving in droves. They go to their houses in the country. I see nothing but men on horseback carting luggage, servants hurrying backwards and forwards. They're happy to leave their townhouses with maybe one servant in attendance. And even if the house is quarantined and a watchman set, they sneak out in the dead of night. I have nothing in the house to eat save some stale bread. I must venture out. I determined at first to get flesh meat, but the rumour is that the plague is hard among the butchers. So I thought to go to the farmer's market at the gate. Well, there I'd be able to obtain eggs and maybe some vegetables. The vendor there has a pot of vinegar in which the money is placed before he will take it. I now have some bread and ale, a little fruit, and some vegetables to make a stew. I will not starve. While at the market, I came across a person distributing printed flyers. I took one and read on it that a certain mountebank or fortune teller by the name of Boniface Hedges was to be at the sign of Friar Bacon's Brazen Head until 4 o'clock. So I thought to have my fortune told. Where this disease has gone, it has brought out both the best and the worst in people. And nothing is so telling as the profusion of quacks and mountebanks that has arisen in the city. They prey on people's anxieties and promise remedy when there is none to be had. We are strange creatures and want always something to cling on to. And where religion has failed, men will turn elsewhere to fill that void. I'd heard of this fellow before. A pretentious name, and one I suppose he thinks gives him weight among the common people. I wanted to know what he peddled. I found him under the sign as promised, and approached with caution. Are you there? Are you the Boniface Hedges that is spoken of in this pamphlet?
Aye, sir. Do you seek a fortune or a remedy for I do both.
Well, surely no one can know my fortune save God.
God seems to have made himself absent, sir. And I have the gift, second sons. Many have come to me and gone away satisfied.
And do you charge for your services?
Not for the telling of fortunes, sir.
What do you normally ask?
Most wish to know if they'll get the plague, and if they'll recover. Some want to know if they'll lose their position or if their master will throw them out of doors. What would you know?
I wanted to test it, for I know that I cannot now get the disease. Why, if I shall get plague or no?
Give me something of yourself, sir, handkerchief. Let me concentrate, sir. I am sorry to say, sir, but you will get the plague in the next week or two. But do not alarm yourself, it will not be fatal.
Well, how can you tell?
It will not be fatal, because you will purchase my remedies.
Well, now here's the rub, and this is how they take the money from the poor. For who would not purchase a remedy if you are told you will get plague? So, what remedies do you?
This amulet, sir. A talisman, soaked in arsenic to ward off the plague spirits. Oh, or this, sir.
What is it?
A magic word. Abracadabra. Used in ancient times. Most powerful in letters of a rune on a paper worn close to the groin. Infection most commonly starts in that area.
Anything I can imbibe, for I'm led to believe that the infection can strike internally.
This concoction is known to be effectual, sir.
And what is in it?
Powdered toad, excrement of bats, viper's blood, and secret herbs handed down to me by a wise woman I knew in Rome.
And why should I trust you?
I have papers, sir, endorsed by Van Tam, the eminent Dutch physician, and by Sinoia Blanchet, who came from Rome and brought her secret arts while I learned her knee.
You're in her bed, most likely. 20,000 died in that city, so her remedies were as useless as all.
Mustard, a mint sauce, apple sauce, horseradish should also be used to balance wet, dry, hot and cold in your diet. And rue burning your house.
And all this will keep me safe.
I guarantee it, sir, on my life. Now, I wish from you half a crown for I have others to see.
And is this your standard charge? Even for the poor?
What use is your silver and gold, if plague eats your innards and worms eats your brains? Now pay up and be on your way.
No, I shall not pay you. I want none of your remedies. I call you out as a fraud.
Fraud, sir? Fraud? What do you know of such things? What proof? Have you got qualifications, papers and the like? Do you know better than the most eminent physicians?
No, but neither do you. I have been shut up with a plague victim for the prescribed time and examined thereafter. You did not see that.
You think because you did not get it, then you will not get it now?
I think your recipes have no more substance than the air.
Be it on your head. But I tell you, you will get the plague. And if my recipes do not save you, then what will? Now I have given advice enough. I wish payment.
I shall not pay you. We have exchanged nothing but words, and words are free.
You fool. You will die in horrible agonies. Fool!
And so he went on, swearing at me and bringing down curses while he shook his fist. I went on my way, but I can see how others might be swayed to part with meagre resources. The poor suffer greatly, as there are no clergy left to administer the parish help. So they're drawn to these cocker hoops. I wish with all my heart I'd gone with my brother. But even if I wanted to, I could not now purchase a horse, for there are none to be had, and no inns will accept travellers. And I must find money soon, or I too will be destitute. I have a few savings put aside, but these will soon be gone. May 1664, and I've had a letter from my brother. He writes to tell me that he is safely settled in Buckinghamshire and sends me his keys and some money. So I am, for the time being, relieved. And my brother Samuel keeps a warehouse in the city where he trades in women's high-crowned hats. He asks me to keep an eye, to check all is well. He does not intend returning to the city anytime soon. And I can't say I blame him. The latest things to be banned: plays, bear baiting, the singing of ballads, all public feasting, and no person to be in an alehouse or tavern after 9 o'clock. I wonder again whether I might try and join him in the country. But travel has become nigh on impossible. Villagers have been quick to block roads and demand permits. Travellers are looked on with suspicion for being away from their houses. And you're likely to be stoned before a permit can even be examined. In the city, we walk in the middle of the road, being careful to maintain a distance from other people and from the pestilent air that might escape the houses shut up. It is thought that the infection is spread through the air or through the touching of clothes and goods. Many who have the disease have no outward symptoms until they drop down dead in the street. Others have the tokens, boils and the like. If these come to a head, a recovery is possible, but this is a very painful business. Mostly, people are quiet and sober, ashen of face and sadness of look. Sometimes the air is pierced with a crying or a wailing. Sometimes a man or a woman will escape a house shut up and run through the streets, maddened with the pain. This is a terrible sight. I saw a man the other day from my window. He ran out from his house, dressed in nothing but a bedsheet. I saw his family run after him and try and contain him, but they could not. He ran all the way down to the river and threw himself in. Some say that the doctoring is worse than the illness itself. Most doctors will now not enter a plague house, but some nurses will take the risk. The only true physic is to release the boil. But this is so painful, many go mad with it. My brother's warehouse is in Swan Alley, about half a mile from my abode. So, having no other pressing business that day, other than listening to the wailing from the house shut up with plague next door, I thought to take my turn there. But as I drew closer, I noticed many women milling around wearing new high-crowned hats. Well, this I thought a little strange, and as I got even closer to the warehouse, I noticed that the gates had been forced open, and there were more women emerging in hats, some of them 2 or 3 on their heads at a time, all chatting amongst themselves. I accosted one of them. "Are you there? Where are you obtaining these hats?"
Why, sir, through that gate there is a variety of hats just for the taking.
Well, do you not know that this warehouse belongs to one Samuel Defoe?
No, sir, I was told they was abandoned goods.
Who told you so?
Why, a woman I met on the street, sir.
Woman, what business have you taken these hats?
As much business as any other.
Well, give those hats to me.
And why do you have need of them?
I have no more need than you. Why do you need so many brand new hats?
I have a large family, sir, and it is said plague is spread by the uncovering of the head.
Who told you that?
Why, the quack on the corner, sir.
Be that as it may, they are not yours to take. They belong to my brother.
And why would your brother need them, seeing they are women's hats?
He trades in them.
And your brother ain't here, is he, sir? And there is no trade in millinery goods now. And how do you know they're not tainted? How do you know you might not got plague just by touching them?
I had no answer to that one. And I suddenly despaired. Life has changed beyond all recognition, and I felt so lost and alone. I hurried back to my dwelling, trying to avoid the terrible sights and sounds I heard from the houses shut up. June 1664, and the plague is hard upon us. Now that I'm over my initial terror, it has become commonplace to see the streets empty and those in them avoiding each other. I need something to occupy my mind, and to make my journal a comprehensive account of this plague here, I need to speak to people from all walks of life. The thing that interests me most is the death cart, and who would do such a job? Necessity leads men to many desperate things, and there is no work now, not for anyone. All labourers concerned with building or repairing dwellings have been laid off. There are no ships in the Thames, save those trapped by circumstance. The list is endless. And of course, many servants are no longer needed, as their masters have retreated to the country. But to the death carts, which come every night. There are no longer any burials in individual graves, but the death cart comes and takes the bodies to a pit, and no one's allowed to see it. Not being able to attend funerals affects people terribly, and many families follow the carts all the way to the cemetery gates, but are not allowed in. There they stand, in mournful wailing. But there are some miracles in this godforsaken place. And one I'm told of concerns a certain John Haywood, under sexton in the parish of St. Stephen. I set out to find him, which I did, smoking his pipe, sitting on the cemetery wall. John, you are bearer of the dead for this parish, I believe.
Oh, you're right enough, young master.
And how did you get this job?
Well, I was a far burier of the dead and bearer of the dead, but now there's no proper burials. Well, I runs the cart and the bell, fetches the bodies out of the houses.
And your wife is a nurse, I believe.
Oh, Rachel be nurse, and she has tended many of the infected and many dead. Do you know, her honesty has been commended by the parish officers, for there's many a nurse what will take what is not rightfully hers out of the houses of the deceased, but neither she nor I take what is not ours.
And you both stayed free of infection. How do you account for this?
Well, I swear by garlic and rue I keeps in my mouth at all times. No, and smoking.
Smoking?
Huh? Well, I believe that smoking tobacco keeps my lungs from inhaling the disease. Well, we often smoke ours what has the plague. My lungs get smoked the same.
And what of your wife? Does she smoke also?
No, not Rachel. She swears by vinegar.
Vinegar?
Huh? She washes her hair in it and has headcloth soaked in vinegar. She has handkerchief soaked in it, holds up to her nose. That help with the smell as well.
But do you not think it's a miracle that you've not been infected?
Well, I give thanks to God, of course, but also to our arts, smoking and pickling.
Pickling?
So strong is that my wife's head smells of vinegar, I reckon I must be pickled by now.
And now, John, there is talk of a miracle resurrection on your cart. Can you speak of it?
Well, yeah, of course, but you must have heard the story of Piper Sam.
Remind me, was he not blind?
No, he weren't blind, just poor ignorant old fellow what got took by the drink there. Before the plague, he used to go piping around about 10 o'clock every night, and folks would often take him up to the public house where he was known, give him victuals and beer, and he'd go on piping for farthings. Of course, time's been hard. There's been times when I've seen old Sam almost starved, and I've said to him how he was doing it. He said, "The debt card has not come for me yet, but be sure to call tomorrow." And I would give him a piece of bread and send him on his way. Anyway, this night, old Sammy got to sleep in a doorway. Somebody piled the bodies up next to him for collecting. I comes round with a cart and I picks him up, and poor old Sam with me. He didn't recognise him. He's just a poor old soul that died of the plague. So I kept piling up the bodies, and him almost get buried, but he never moved a muscle, just kept on sleeping. Reckon I collected nigh on 20 bodies that night. And we goes to the graveyard. But when we get to the pit, there's a stirring amongst the bodies, and suddenly old Sammy pops his head up and he says, "Where am I?" Well, I gave me a right shot, I can tell you. I helps him down from the cart, give him a drink of beer from the bottle I had with me, sent him on his way. But good luck, and promise him more beer when I see him. Pickled, you said? Too pickled for the plague to take hold. Well, that's what I reckons.
Oh, this story cheered me for a few hours, but my spirits soon felt low again. Is there no end to this pestilence? I sleep fitfully and have strange dreams where I search the streets for my family and can never find them. I wake as tired as I went to bed, and my mind troubles me constantly. And many say that things will only get worse. Who will save us from the wrath to come if it be worse than this terror that is yet upon us? July 1664, and the city stews beneath the heat of the sun. The weather gets hotter and hotter. The one time we wish for English weather, and we get Italian. Or maybe it blows over from the land of the Moors. A place I should very much like to visit when this is all over. Working on the docks, I would often speak to captains who plied their trade there and dealt in the exotic, spices and silks. They would speak of these men, tall and dark, in flowing robes and turbaned heads, shrewd of business, but with an open hand and heart to the traveller. I should very much like to see it for myself. One day. All trade had ceased in April by order of the magistrate, so the poor who relied on their labour now rely on charity. Where this charity money comes from can only be guessed at, as the clergy who were meant to administer the parish help left long ago, and churches remain shut and bolted. Some say the bulk of the money comes from wealthy individuals, but others suggest the city authorities have raided funds meant for other quarters. There will be a mighty hole in many public finance when this is all over, I have no doubt. And many private ones too, I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be some that do well enough, though, and are not hard-pressed. There are always those who land on their feet, wealthy or no, and they tend to be the wealthiest, who use their money for nothing but themselves. Actually, some churches have reopened recently, but these are not places to go unless you are close to death yourself. For although they burn candles and incense constantly, the plague is no respecter of man or God, and will strike you whether you be pious or the worst of sinners. I admit, I find it hard to fill my time. Anxiety prevents me from continuing with my novel, the story of a man in exile on a desert island. It's too close to home. We're all in exile now. We avoid each other in the street. We glare at our neighbours, but we can hardly muster a nod in greeting. And the wearing of the beak-like masks that has become fashionable, especially among doctors, makes those inside seem strange and otherworldly. The story I'm trying to write was told to me by an old sea dog. It concerns a sailor who, having survived a shipwreck, has to find ways of keeping his wits from going mad and being the only one left alive. I should know how he feels, but I cannot bring my mind to the writing of it. Being at a loss one day, I thought to go for a walk along the Thames. I thought to maybe find a boatman to talk to and add his story to my journal. And sure enough, I found someone dressed as a waterman just walking along the bank. So I hallooed him. How are you, sir, in these troubled times?
Who's asking?
My name is Daniel, sir. I'm a writer. I'm documenting how people fare in these troubling times.
For what reason?
Well, just for my own journal, sir.
Well, alas, almost all around here be sick or dead. Over there, man, wife, 5 children, here an old couple. There, man, servant, 3 sons.
And what of your family?
My cottage is over there, sir. My wife and 1 child is sick, another dead, 2 living.
But you are well.
I have moved out of the dwelling, so yes, I am well, sir.
How can you abandon them?
I can't. I don't. But today I live with them.
Well, then where do you live?
On my boat, sir, on my boat. And I bring supplies to those still in isolation on the river.
I'm sorry, I do not mean to intrude. I really just want to help. So you are a waterman?
Yes, sir. My name is Elijah Goodfellow. My boat serves as both house and transport. I bring victuals and money to them when I can.
And where do you obtain provision?
I goes to Greenwich or Woolwich, farms on the Kentish side. Fowls, eggs and butter I takes to the ship's side and they haul them on board.
And does this keep your family?
I earn a little money, sir. See, I have a few coins and some bread and a little salt fish.
How do you get it to your wife, seeing as your cottage has plague?
Well, you see that stone over there, sir? I places the money under the stone and the bag by it, and then I calls out, and my wife comes at a distance and retrieves it. I'm going over there now, sir. Sarah! Sarah!
And out she came, poor woman. Wretched creature, all skin and bone, with a child of about 5 clinging to her skirts. They greeted each other, and then she picked up the provisions before scuttling back into the house. It was a sorrowful sight, and I hastened away before I could bear the sight no more. I tried to forget what I'd witnessed that day, but it bothered me for several days to come that I'd not offered to help the man and his wife with a little bread or some coin. What have we come to, that we've lost all filial feeling to our brother man? Has this pestilence made us into brute creatures with no heart? Does the plague eat our humanity also? So, I resolved to go back to the river and see if I could find the spot again. And sure enough, as I was drawing near to the cottage, I saw the man Elijah just tying up his boat. So I called to him, "Boatman Elijah, how are you, my fine fellow?"
I am, as you see me, sir. Do I know you?
Daniel, sir. I was here last week. We spoke together. You live in that cottage with your wife, Sarah, I believe.
You're right in what you say, sir. But come no closer. Be wary of my health and yours also.
Last week you were well, Elijah. Has something worse happened?
And not to me, sir, but it is you come from the city where it is well known that the pestilence is in every street.
I am free of illness, I can assure you.
That you may well carry it.
I am very careful, and I have been shut up with a plague victim and examined thereafter. I am as free from illness as you are. I wanted to reassure him, for I thought maybe he might take me out on his boat. The river looked inviting, and I wanted to speak to some of the people on the ships he provisioned.
Forgive my suspicions, sir, but many depend on my staying healthy with my family and those I bring supplies to.
I would not for all the world wish you any trouble, Elijah. I just wanted to bring you this.
Thank you, sir. The bread I will take, sir, and the money. The clothing I will leave, sir. My wife is fearful of goods from others' houses. But I thank you kindly for your trouble.
How is your wife?
She lives still, sir, and is a little better, I'm pleased to say.
And the child?
The child died, sir.
I'm sorry, Elijah.
So am I. So am I. She was a bonny thing when born. I had hoped she would keep my wife company when she was old, and I out on the river. But she spared the pains of life now, and nothing more can touch her, so I must be grateful for that.
You have other children?
The one left living, sir, a boy of 7, and he is in good health, thanks be to God. And my wife is young enough to have other children when this pestilence is over and we have a mind to live together again.
I'm glad you're so hopeful, Elijah. I'm amazed you do not curse God in your distress.
Others have suffered the same or worse. We are like the children of Israel, sir, when the plague passed over Egypt and the eldest of each house died. It is a great sorrow, and not to be made light of. But at least some of us are spared. Now, I must be getting on with my work. I thank you kindly for the bread and the money, and I wish you good health.
And off he went. I did not ask him to go out on the river, for I did not want him to be fearful, or to feel obliged to me. Poor soul has enough trouble keeping body and soul together. But I resolved to visit him again in a week or two, with more provisions, and to see how he did. This small act of kindness, and his hopeful words to our present situation, made a calm within my spirit. And I thought to maybe take a turn with my pens that evening. Perhaps my shipwrecked sailor is calling to me to finish his story. Perhaps there are worse things than being alone. September 1664. And the plague raged so throughout August, I knew not whether any would be left in the city alive. But we are now at last seeing a reduction in the numbers of dead in the weekly death tolls, for which we all give thanks to whomsoever we've been addressing our prayers. But this reduction in number brings its own problems. For although the contagion is not yet past, there is a new spirit in the city. People are not afraid of company as they once were. They go into each other's houses and eat and drink there, even in the chambers where the sick lie dying. The doctors and physicians oppose this thoughtless humour of the people with all their might. They hand out printed flyers warning people of the dangers and making them be on their guard again, frightening them with the terror of a relapse bringing the plague hard into the city again. But it's all to no purpose. The joy at seeing the numbers of dead reduce and the freedom of being allowed out of doors has led to a general delight, with many shops reopening and people going about their business as usual. It is amazing, as even now up to 1,800 a week are dying. But the populace flock to town as if all was well. And for a while, I became a searcher of houses. Examiners are needed by the authorities, and men are conscripted to do the job for 2 months. I tried to get out of it, for I do not really believe in the shutting up of houses. You see, it causes great hardship, but I could only get a reduction to 3 weeks. I wanted to know a little about what this job was to involve, and so I set out to speak to the nurse. My job was to go with a nurse to the houses that were believed to have plague and to determine whether they had the disease or no, and if so, to order the shutting of the house and the setting of the watchman. As I say, this causes great distress, especially for those in the household who do not have plague, for they see it as a death sentence. But there is no other recourse, and as the numbers of dead do seem to be reducing, it has to be set to work. I found the nurse eating her meal in the tailor's yard. She had an apple, much shrivelled, a piece of cheese, and an onion. Mistress Elizabeth, how find you the work of nurse in these strange times?
Well, sir, I'm much in demand, but I choose the houses I'll go to once examined. I'll only go to a house if it's a person on their own or a mother and children. If it's a person on their own, I shall keep to my own room and put victuals outside the door. If it's a mother and children and the mother is sick, I will look after the children all the time, wearing my bonnet soaked in vinegar and breathing in rue and vinegar.
And how do you avoid catching the plague? I ask because I'm to be an examiner of houses for the next 3 weeks.
I swear by an onion, sir, eaten raw. It has a powerful smell that lingers and keeps people and plague away together.
Do not doubt you on that front. My eyes are beginning to water already.
And you must wear a hat, sir, sprayed in vinegar, and a handkerchief so soaked that you keep to your mouth and nose at all times. And if you can, drink a pint of vinegar before you start work.
And what of your husband? Does he not fear you'll bring plague home?
What? My Walter, sir? No, he thinks he's immune.
How so?
Well, he was a country man before I married him. I'm his second wife. And when he was in the country, he was looking after horses. And once he was shoeing a horse and it kicked out and knocked his wits into his hat. But he suffered no more than a dent in his paint and the habit of saying horse at random times.
Well, that must be disconcerting.
Yes, sir, especially in the middle of the night. Another time, he caught distemper from bad feed, and he was in bed for a month, close to death. His wife was told he would not live, but after a month he woke up and said, "Bessie," for that was her name. "Bessie, bring me a bowl of gruel, for I have a mighty hunger on me." And he was right as rain after that, until he was leading a bull to market, and it turned back and gored him in the stomach. But the local seamstress sewed him up, and he was fine from then on, apart from he cannot eat an onion without having a mighty pain. So I says to him, I says, "Walter, I'll be nurse. What think you of the danger? And he says, Lizzie, I have died 3 times already. Plague cannot touch me now.
And do you have any children?
5, sir, but they're with my sister-in-law in the country where my husband used to live. I know they're safe there, and I often have to stay nights, weeks at a time. Walter can look after himself, but not 5 babies.
You do not trust him?
Oh, nothing to do with trust, sir. Too much for any man, I'm reckoning. And Walter not being the first flush of youth. And I was afraid I'd come home and they'd be running around naked or setting the house alight. And I can't have that on my mind. Not with those poor creatures I'm looking after.
How do you put up with the misery?
I'm a nurse, sir, and I'm used to it. And I steel myself. And I think of better times, where the children will run in the streets and the world will be clean again. And I think of the roast goose I'm going to have at Michaelmas. With my wages, I'm going to buy such a goose as never was seen. But I'd only invite me neighbours and strong friends. I think of these things, sir. I think of these things. And that gets me through.
Oh, she was a jolly soul, in spite of our work. And I have to say, her recipe for preventing the infection did seem to work. I was pleased when my 3 weeks were over, though. We now come to October, and the winds hold promise of colder nights and frosty days. I hope, as many think, whether this might turn the plague back to where it came from, across the narrow sea to sunnier lands. Countrymen predict a bitter winter, so it is thoroughly hoped that this will end the outbreak. Many have suffered, and the world is not as it was. But I hope the city will have a new face, with people kinder to their neighbours, with new morals and manners. I fear that, just like the sailors after the storm has passed, they will be just as stupid and wicked as before. I hope this is not the case, but only the turning of the seasons will tell. The year is 1692, and as I set out on this, the 3rd of April, I intend to take what I can honestly call a circuit to the very letter of the word, for my plan is to travel along the coast of the Thames, through the southern side of the county of Essex, until I come to Malden, Colchester, and then Harwich, and then along the Suffolk coast until I reach Yarmouth. And while I travel, I will write. I am at last a published author. My novel, Robinson Crusoe, published at last. And well received, I might add. I have another in mind, Moll Flanders, based on a lady I used to know. She's gone now. A sad demise, but an interesting history. But before I set it down, I have a mind to travel and maybe set down some of our country in another journal. I did intend travelling alone, but my brother thought he'd accompany me. He is restless after retiring from his business, and his children are all grown. He did think maybe I would take over the warehouse, but I had other plans. I am at last a published writer, a writer of journals and essays, a writer of papers, and a writer of novels.
Just as well, since all your sallies into trade have lost money. And I can no longer afford to bail you out. Now you have a wife and so many children.
Yes, I married Mary 10 years ago, for her dowry as much as for her looks. And the children came thick and fast. 8 now, I believe. I had bad luck.
You had bad judgment. Cows, bricks, hosiery, diving bells.
The diving bells could have worked. Well, there are numerous shipwrecks out there just waiting to have the cargo plucked.
And civets.
The civets were an admirable idea. They just did not produce the required income quickly enough.
Now, what do you know of producing perfume from such creatures? And the civet farms were taken to pay your debts.
My debts, yes. I do suffer greatly with debts. But I hope that now I am a published writer, my financial situation will ease.
And do not think you will make enough from your novels. This is but a hobby.
And my brother has always been careful of money, and a scorner of the literary arts as a way of making it.
So, do you have victuals for the journey? I think I'll go and purchase some.
Oh, there's a stall across the road, sells very good pies.
Ah, and it is pies I will purchase.
And some small beer if they have it.
Ah?
It is now 20 years since that terrible plague time. A time in which up to 200,000 people died throughout the country as a whole. I may have misled you a little with my journal of the plague year. Although it is written in my own voice, I was actually but a child at the time. But all the accounts are true and taken from interviews that I made personally, so it is truthful nonetheless. Many thought the pestilence would never leave, but as the year waned, it did begin to fall off. Some said it was the cold winter, others the hand of God. For who else could stop such a terrible disease? Not the quacks, that was for sure. Was there really much more hope in religion? Those people returning to their houses in the city were quick to fumigate by burning fragrant spices or wood or even gunpowder, which did have the desired effect. Your house is plague-free if it's a pile of cinders. And of course, the whole of London was so purged in 9 months' time. In Cripplegate, where my brother and I were then living, only ours and our neighbour's house survived the Great Fire. And when the city was rebuilt, many improvements were made. Streets were widened, pavements created, open sewers abolished, and the use of brick and stone was mandatory. So, quite conversely, the plague brought us to a time in which we have a healthier environment in which to live.
What could it have been but the hand of God?
And my brother has become quite religious in his old age.
There was no end to the suffering. And if the pestilence had gone on for another few weeks, no one would have been left alive. Men everywhere had fallen into despair and hearts failed for fear. But at the very moment when vain was the help of man, it pleased God to cause the fury to abate.
I have to say that the change in the populace when the weekly bills came out and the number of dead had fallen by 2,000 in one day, it was indescribable. And then throughout November, people started making recoveries from the illness, and the recovery reported to be less painful than before.
Yeah, there was no new medicines, no new treatments. I tell you, it was God. The pestilence that walks in darkness, the destruction that wasteth at noonday. Nothing else could have stopped it.
The important point is, it was stopped. There was an end to it, and life was able to begin to return to normal.
I still put it down to God.
You can, if it makes you happy. Now, did you get the pies?
Yes, a mutton and a caper.
Excellent. So, let us plan our route for the journey.
Where did you have in mind?
Colchester. It is an ancient corporation, a very large and populous. The streets are fair and beautiful. And then there's Harwich.
Surely there's not much at Harwich.
It is enough that it is one of the securest harbours in all of England, with a strong gun fort at the Suffolk side of the bay.
Ah, I have heard that Ipswich has a most commodious harbour. It is fortified with a ditch and a rampart. It has great trade and is most populous, being adorned with 14 churches and splendid public buildings.
Maybe we should visit Ipswich also.
Yes. Well, draw up a route for us then while I see to the provisions. For I am determined that we should not go hungry, and inns may be scarce on the route.
Will not God provide, as he did in plague time?
Do not be facetious, brother, or I may repent my willingness to be your travelling companion. Now, see to the map.
I am fond of my brother, but I would not want him turning back now. Despite our differences, we get along well, and I think all of us who came to the end of that time should be grateful. It was the strangest of times to have lived through, and many did not survive, or survived to be fearful like my brother, or never regained their senses or their courage. But I know that I will always be better for having lived through it, and remember how it made me into the writer I am today. A dreadful plague in London ended in 65, which swept 100,000 souls away, yet I, alive. My name is Daniel Defoe, and this is my journal of the plague year.
Before we go to the Edinburgh Fringe. We don't get any regular funding, so if you've got any loose change that you'd like to fold up and put in the jar at the back, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.